Hi, everyone. Welcome to all the friends, old and new, young and old, black and white and spotted. We're really happy to be here. If there's anyone that whom we haven't met, myself, Beatrix Ost, or Jesse Israel, by the end of the night, please come and give us a hug, say hello, because once we sit together like this, we think of ourselves as a unit and a tribe, and we want to get to know you all a little better. For those whom I haven't met, hi, can you guys see me in the back now? I'm Donna D Cruz, and we have this salon. We started it just about a year ago, and the idea with the salon, I think in these times, increasingly now, more and more unsettled, people are feeling a little bit more unstable in some ways. So the great paradox of our times is that I think we have this incredible ability, as the ancient rishis talked about, to communicate almost telepathically with increasingly little and little less to say to each other, smacked with more and more ignorance and arrogance. And so fundamentally, the reason that we're having the turning points is really, as you guys entered into the space, you entered with a certain idea of maybe what you were going to do here, or maybe an idea of yourself, or maybe not. The idea is that this is a wisdom well, and it's a crucible of ideas, and so we want it to be interactive. The idea being that there'll be enough in here stirred up that will have a beautiful enough and resonant enough conversation that's inclusive of all of you, and that you walk out of here with a little titillation, maybe a little idea of something else that maybe you hadn't thought of, and certainly a bit of wisdom that you'll then take out into the world and seed. That's the idea, so that we go from seed to a forest of incredibly beautiful, brave ideas. So welcome to the Turning Points. I'm Donna D Cruz again, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Beatrix Ost and to Jesse Israel. And before we do any of that, we always start everything with a little breath. So we're going to start with a meditation, just a couple of minutes, but just to bring us into the space. So if you would, just gently close your eyes, and if you're carrying a phone or any other tech, just pop it on the floor. And just notice how you're feeling. Take a long, slow, deep breath in through the nose. And let go. And just for a few moments, just check in with that sacred breath. That breath that animates your divine nature. That breath that connects you to all sentient beings, to the cosmos and beyond. And if you have a sacred tone that you use in your own practice, by all means, just invite that. Or if you want to join us, very simply, with your next inhale, silently say the word let. And with your next exhale, silently say the word go. And just keep repeating that as you drop in. Let your thoughts come and go. They will, like a delightful breeze. Just come back to the breath whenever you feel yourself drifting off. There's no work here for you. No effort. Just you and your breath. Inhaling let. Exhaling go. Keeping your eyes softly closed. Just notice who's doing the noticing. That part of you that is the silent witness to this delicious silence. In the ancient books, it speaks of this part of you that the water cannot wet, nor the fires burn, or winds ever dry up. It is eternal, as you are. Let's put your hands together gently. Let your thumb rest on your sternum. And just press those palms together and feel that left side, that divine feminine, which will journey into the conversation today. Feel her pushed up against the right side, the sun side, Surya. The moon part of us, filled with intuition, the part of us that knows how to yield, pushed up against the male, the part of us that knows how to move swiftly when needed and how to be the aggressor. And it's asked for balance for both and for all parts of ourselves. Take a long, slow, deep breath in through the nose and let go. I wish each of you namaste. Whenever you're ready, come back to the room. Okay, we're ready to roll. So let's roll this. We have just a quick intro to give you guys a little bit of context around who Beatrice and Jessie Israel are. The picture tells 1,000 words, so if you guys can run that.
Sometimes just closing your eyes and trying to not think for a second feels really, really, really nice.
We started the Big Quiet 1 year ago. Some New Yorkers will share meditation in a way that's social, collaborative, and in line with the way that we live our lives.
How cool is that? You guys are really awesome. Okay, so really happy to share so much. There's so much I wanted to get through tonight, but I think I might actually introduce you to Jessie Israel first, because it's kind of an interesting story. How many people here have ever heard or been to one of the Medi Clubs or the Big Quiets? Great. So you guys have got some context and you know how incredibly rich and timely and important this work is that Jessie's doing. So the idea of the turning points is actually to explore those places where each of us go down a certain road, down a path, and we're forced to make a decision, whether we get interrupted or we have an epiphany, but we have to make that sort of decision, and it's a fork in the road, and what you do right at that point then determines the very trajectory of the rest of your life. We invite wisdom, we invite lots of things to kind of help us transform. It's not always the case. It can be a lot of trials. And so Jesse, you were in the music business, right? So you come out of school, you're in the music business, and you have a label called Cantora. And I want to actually read this because this is pretty awesome. I'll give you guys a little snapshot. Jesse's a community builder with a passion for creating experiences around human connection. The founder of the Be Quiet, a mass meditation movement that hosts large-scale moments of quiet and culture in iconic landmarks like Summer Stage, Central Park, and Oculus World Trade Center. He's also the founder of MediClub, which is a community of thousands of young New Yorkers that come together to meditate and explore purpose-driven living. So now he's also speaking with Fortune 500 and 2 Fortune 500 companies, advises community-driven startups, and rides with the Cyclones Bike Club. Before that, he was the co-founder of Cantora, a record label turned tech venture studio responsible for signing bands like MGMT and for building businesses with talent as diverse as the Wu-Tang Clans and also Frank Sinatra Enterprises. So that's a pretty great variety, right? So as a music junkie, I'd be lying if my eye first didn't say, like, what's up with the Wu and Frank Sinatra? How'd that go down? Go.
Let's see. I was approached by Jizz's manager. Jizza is one of the founding members of the Wu-Tang Clan. My instruction was to teach him how to use Twitter. And we did a couple of sessions, and it was great to talk about social media. But we wound up working together and brainstorming on more unique ways for him to share about his passion for academia, especially around science, and how to incorporate it into his art form. And he actually did. I wasn't involved with the booking of this, but when we were working together, he did a series of tours at different Ivy League schools where he spoke about physics and science and rap music. Pretty cool.
How fascinating, right? I think that outfit's a really interesting sort of collective of minds and action and poetry. I just find them to be like on another level, up there with Della, I think, in terms of their poetry. And then Sinatra, how does Frank Sinatra Enterprises come into it? Did you have to teach them something too in social?
No, the last couple years at my record label, I was getting pretty antsy and was sort of losing my passion for signing bands. And we created an organization with a few other partners, something that we called Mainframe. And the concept was to bring together scientists, heavy-hitting deal makers, a design firm, my company, and a couple of biomedical investors. And we were looking at how we could innovate in the live music space and create technologies and experiences that could really push boundaries for experiencing music in person. So we were introduced to Warner Music Group. They were representing Frank Sinatra's catalog, and we worked together on a live experience, an immersive live experience that's still in the works. That's all I can say.
Long may he live. Oh, that's amazing. So then you had a label, right? So this is the part where it gets interesting because you're a music junkie, music lover. So did you have partners in the label, and did it start out of your bedroom like a Def Jam sort of a thing?
Yeah, actually at the same school too.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, at NYU, sophomore year, my sophomore roommate, a really brilliant man named Will Griggs. He sat me down one day. He said, "Jesse, you listen to this song." My cousin, his cousin, who was going to Wesleyan, had these two buddies, and they made this song in their dorm room. He said, "Jesse, I'm going to play you this song." He said, "I guarantee you'll listen to nothing else for the next 2 weeks." All right. He played an early recording of the song "Kids" by MGMT. Does anybody know that song? Yeah, wonderful
totally.
song. And I was a film student. I was 19, 20 years old. We didn't know what we were doing, but we went and we visited the band and watched them play a show in front of about 12 people, and approached them afterwards and said that we wanted to manage them. We didn't know what that meant. We had no idea what we were doing. I remember the conversation being really sort of surreal, like they weren't really looking at us while we were speaking. They were very sort of artistic. And
maybe they were just stoned.
Maybe. They actually also at that concert, they brought a tree onto the stage, and they put mics up to the tree, and they just left for a few minutes. It's kind of like an interesting representation or maybe foreshadowing of what was to come. But they agreed to allow us to manage them. And all we could really bring to the table was like some sort of an organizational sense. They were at school at Wesleyan College. We went to NYU. So we started spreading the word and finding ways to get people to care about their music. At Wesleyan, they were becoming mini celebrities. They'd play kids at house parties, and they'd play it 5 times back to back.
Wow.
People were getting crazy for it, and we kind of knew that there was something special happening there. And a senior in high school in Los Angeles, which is where I grew up, got in touch with me and heard that Will and I were working with this band, and he asked if he could join our team. And we were just so moved by his passion. His name's Nick Panama. We were so moved by his passion and his ability to hold himself. And just, we created a record label to put out MGMT's first album. And Nick wound up coming to NYU, and we built this record label around MGMT's growth. By the time we graduated in 2008, MGMT was really like a global sensation.
Yeah, they were popping.
And we went from, we have cell phone footage from one of the first shows where we saw them play with a couple of people. And then we have cell phone footage of them playing the same song in front of 90,000 people at Lollapalooza. Wow. Very surreal
What a great
experience.
feeling.
Yeah.
Wow.
The coolest thing about that was just seeing thousands of people singing the lyrics to the chorus together, sort of being united through lyrics and art.
The power of music.
And that really was the first moment where I got a sense of the power of connection and community through something that gives you permission to connect. In that case, it was music and festivals.
It's funny that we think we need permission, huh?
I agree.
Yeah.
I think I sense that we are so hungry to connect with each other, but without permission, we won't really go there. But the second the permission's granted, we just dive in.
Yeah. And yet that door's always open. So we'll take a little journey down there in a second. But I just want to ask you a little bit about that place of, so the label, was that actually Cantora? Was that the name of the label?
Yeah.
Did you have other artists on the label? Or was it fundamentally like MGMT?
Oh, no. We did a joint venture with Sony, and we signed a bunch of artists.
Wow.
One of the artists that was maybe the third sign. They're called Francis and the Lights, and they're now he just did a video with Kanye West and Bon Iver, and he's touring with Chance the Rapper. So it's cool to see some of the other acts starting to.
That's a great. So how long were you doing the label for? So there was you, Will, and another guy, Nick, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Started it when I was 20.
Yeah.
I moved on when I was 29, and I'm 32 now.
Right. So let's get to that point of moving on, right? So turning point. Things were going maybe not the way you wanted, or you had an idea about how the label or the artists were going to go, or something you said to me was like, I just felt out of love with it, and you knew that something was going to have to change.
Yeah. From a logical view, everything was great. The company's reputation was at its peak. We had this growing business. We were finally making money for ourselves, which was a real treat. And we had this beautiful loft that was our office in Soho, and great business partners. And
partying.
Yeah, there was all that came with that working in that industry.
Yeah.
So the list of pros was very long. The list of cons was very short. It was just one thing. It was my heart wasn't in it anymore. And that was really challenging for me to face, because this was all I knew. And I really defined myself by the success of this company and the success of our projects and our bands.
And you probably worked your ass off, I'm sure, to get to that point. It's hard.
We worked hard. Definitely, we worked hard. We made a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah.
And, because we saw success with MGMT when we were young, I really identified with that success as me. Mm-hmm. So to feel like I no longer wanted to be doing the work was very confusing. Mm-hmm. And I had a couple of identity crisis moments. The first time it actually happened was 5 years before I left. And that's when I got into meditation, because the stress and the anxiety, I was having panic attacks. Mm-hmm. And that's actually, it was through that moment, meditation, we actually shifted into technology. That was sort of a way to sustain some other interests. But then here we were at the point we were just talking about 3 years ago, and I was feeling it again. And this time I knew it was time to take a leap into the unknown. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. I had about 6 months of savings in my bank account as runway. So I just went for it. I had no idea what I wanted to do next.
I was going to ask you that because I think many people, I think we can all relate to that point, to that place where it's time to end the relationship or the business, just go another direction. It takes great temerity of spirit to kind of say, fuck it, okay, we're going to do it. What does that feel like when and the Zen koan that says, jump and then it appears. That's all very well. But when you're actually standing there like, okay, really? How are we going to do this? So how did you, what can you kind of say, like, what did it feel like? I'm going to do it. I'm going to not have any income. You really didn't know what you were going to do. It wasn't like you had this construct of an idea of something that you wanted to create, right?
I had an expectation that I would have my next thing figured out, and I think in my head it would be around fall, and I left the company in March. So that was the kind of I didn't know what it was, but that's kind of all I was thinking. And when I left the company, and that was a real process. I mean, that was emotional with my business partners, with my investors, with the projects. I learned a lot from that experience. Definitely some things I would have done differently. But when I took the leap, I was elated. I'd never honored my heart and intuition in such a way before. And I really felt alivening in a way that I'd never experienced. And that was really exciting. And I traveled and I did that whole thing. And then when I got back in the fall, and it was the sort of expected time to have the next thing identified, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then I got hit with the reality of the fact that for the first time, pretty much in my life, I wasn't in school or I wasn't working. And there I was in the city. I was 29. I was about to turn 30. And I felt purposeless. I found myself constantly comparing my peers. My group of friends are very ambitious and successful. And I was watching their sort of successes. And social media was a very tough thing for me at that time. Really sort of comparing all of the sort of highlight reels that you see on social media to the sense of isolation that I was experiencing and sort of confusion that I was going through. A very dark period for me. And I put myself in the situation, so I was like, I didn't feel right to do too much of a poor me moment. So I can go on, but.
Yeah, okay, let's just take a little shift over to you, Divine Beatrix Ost, who, besides being a beauty, painter, sculptor, writer, theater, and film director, right? And beloved by many people, Eric Repair, the Olsen twins, me included. So let's talk. I want to just read this amazing quote that was written about you in your book, but it encapsulates you. While water will be hoarded and air will be taxed, I believe space can only be held. In doing this, living in held space, Beatrix assumes this role of nomadic scholar and reluctant mystic. Beatrix holds space in such abundance that she has plenty to give. And she does that often and freely. Isn't that just so beautiful? I was so touched. So I want to ask you about that. And I know what a lover you are of so many things. We saw a little bit of your art up there, and so much of it is connected to nature. How does nature and art, how does nature, Mother Nature, impact your art? That's I found fascinating throughout everything I saw.
Well, I think it is completely unconscious. I think it's where I come from. I grew up after the war in Germany where everything was destroyed, but we had a large estate and we had food and we were giving and everything had to do with food and everything had to do with survival. And there was always talk about, and my mother would bring flowers onto the table and nobody was allowed to talk about Hitler and about the horror. Everybody had to look forward. And there was nature around us. It was very, very, very important. And so unconsciously, I am very in it. And I have a farm in Virginia, which I adore, and I have it since '82. So I'm always on a farm as well. As a, yeah, it is like it makes you breathe and relive and reorganize your mind, and yeah,
Grounds you.
it's, yeah, and grounding you.
That idea, I found that fascinating because I often wonder, I think we all have wondered because we are living through such turbulence at the moment, and when we look at what's happening with the refugee crisis around the world, your family, just at that time, post-war, World War II, what happens to one's spirit? What happened to you and your family, like in terms of your brothers and sisters?
We had everything, but we took in refugees. And I remember as a small child after the war that there was people from Dachau came to our farm, and I see them in front of me, and and my mother and my father had them in our yard for weeks and weeks, and this was like they were completely, I mean, they were not even, they were so in such horrible state, and my parents fed them and helped them and healed them, and so they could go on back east where they came from, you know, gypsies and people from Slavic countries. And so I think that was your question, right? So today when I see that, it's like, I know that so deeply. And yeah, it's just part of me.
I was curious also about that part of you, like you said, like your mum and dad, as a collective, as a family. I'm sure other families went through the similar thing, but there's a place where you can mourn, there's a place where you have to heal, but there's also that place where you want to collect and just keep going. So how did you guys what decision? It sounds like your family made that decision to let's get on with it, but how did that inform who you were in your art and everything else?
I think. Everything is a process. You are whether you know about it or not. But I am. It's easy for me to let go and go on, and because it was so prevalent in the family, nobody was almost allowed to look at the past. It was too horrible. It was just about going on, go forward. Always. Yeah.
So that's It wasn't just to heal. It was just
And when I was a teenager, we lived in the city then, and the city was completely still destroyed. I see it in front of me, and there were secret places in nightclubs where I would steal into. There was so little law. I ran away from my parents' place and had a boyfriend and went at night into completely bombed out villas, but down in the basement there was a nightclub, and they played jazz because the American troops were in Munich. And at one point there was Louis Armstrong playing in a jazz club because he was entertaining the troops in Munich. So I grew up in this kind of wild world of destruction and hope, and and it was fabulous. I don't have it in any way a memory of sadness or so. It was just really cool.
But you have that nature. That's what we often talk about. What is your essential nature? And what your essential nature oftentimes will get sort of tested, and you can decide how you want to transform your pain into wisdom. What you do in that crucible of desire is everything. And in the Hindu text, they often talk about this idea where we have creation, sustainability, destruction. And it goes in a cycle always. We always have those three gods, that sort of are the epitome of those three things. But you cannot have one without the other.
Exactly.
But you have to keep making those decisions.
Yeah, but the destruction brings this phenomena of recreation. Because if it's not there, you kind of lull, you know. It is the pulse. Like after an illness, you are somehow healthier. You know, it just is that. And we just, if we are clever, we follow it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, how does that relate to, so you're at Cantora, Jesse, band's going kind of well, everything's flying, you're happy to the outside world, but inside your heart's being pulled. So when we look at this idea of creation, sustaining, destruction, and the cycle, where were you there in those three? Sometimes they sort of, you know, fold into each other, but where were you in that cycle of growth?
Well, I went through that cycle a few times in my former career. The area that I spoke about right before I left, the creation, the most recent creation period was the work that we were doing with Frank Sinatra Enterprises and some of these more tech-focused experiences, and it was new, it was exciting. It wasn't just signing bands and the things that we initially did, and that really filled me up. And I loved jumping into a new industry and sort of exploring and learning and meeting people. And then it went into the phase of sustaining, when I just felt like I was sort of going through the motions, and I was good at what I was doing, but it wasn't necessarily what I felt like I was here to be doing, but I just kept doing it. In the destruction period, I would where I left off by the time I made that change, and then I was faced with the unknown and uncertainty in a way that was almost paralyzing, in a way I'd never experienced before. Yeah.
So what did you do with that?
Well, the isolation and discomfort that I experienced as I transitioned, it wasn't just just a couple of months. I mean, that feeling came and went for the next couple of years, and I still we'll have moments later. I've since come to learn to really appreciate the power and the learning and the strengthening that comes from those periods. We can touch on that later. To answer your question, I started asking people what they thought my gifts were. I was asking my friends and family members and people that I respected. I felt so sort of lost in regards to what I wanted to do next. I was going to people to get their input, and what I was hearing was, Jesse, you're a natural community builder. You have a unique form of leadership, and you're a mirror. They were referring to how I loved self-help in my 20s, and I was always very eager to talk about my feelings, which often would allow someone else to feel like they had permission to talk about their feelings in a mirror in that way. So and I would hear that and I'd say, that's great, but how am I going to make my $1 billion tech startup? And eventually I just decided that I would experiment. And I would take these gifts and I would blend them with something that I was very passionate about. Meditation was one of the only consistent things in my life at that moment, because there was so much transition. And I really feel like my meditation practice gave me the clarity and courage to leave in the first place. So it meant a lot to me. It still does. So I decided to bring people together around meditation. And I had done this a few times in an experimental format in regards to permission, which I think are worth mentioning. These were like my little experiments which led me to this moment. And I did 2 experiments that were really important to me throughout my 9 years in the music industry, outside of the music industry. The first one was a cheeseburger club. It was in my early 20s. There were my 10 best buddies and I would come together every other week, and we'd eat a different cheeseburger, and we would go to have a different burger at the different boroughs of New York.
I love America.
Yeah, it's very, very sort of American and maybe a little scary sounding in this day and age. But what was happening was we were eating burgers and we were drinking beers, but what was happening was we were actually creating the space to expose what was really going on in our lives. And it was like men's therapy group sometimes, and it was seen as this like kind of cool guy, burger club. We had like jackets and all that stuff.
Of course you did. There was merch.
But men were crying at these gatherings, and it was what? It was one of the most important things in my life at the time. I organized it. My role was the commissioner, And that meant more to me. That meant more to me than anything else because I had this sense of support, a small sense of community, but there was bonding and brotherhood in a way that I didn't have in my life, especially in New York. This place could be so lonely. And that burger club spread to other cities and other countries. So that's when I first kind of got a glimpse, and then it disbanded, and that was very upsetting. And
There goes the jacket.
and I was thinking at the time, at this point, it was 2013. I was thinking about how I could sort of create that same feeling of connection and community. And I was thinking about other ways to create the permission for that to happen. And I was thinking about being a kid and having fun. And I always loved riding bikes. So I reached out to about 20 friends who had bikes and said, "Do you want to start a bike club?" And we did this thing where we all met at the base of the Williamsburg Bridge on June 15th, 2013. And we rode our bikes together to Coney Island, went on a cycling roller coaster. And on the way back, it was like a 6-hour experience. This group of 18 of us felt so. Zoe was on the first ride. Zoe was on the first ride. I just remember that. So it was on the first ride. Anyways, on the ride back, we decided we would call ourselves the Cyclones. And then we did a bike club, we all told our friends, and then by the end of the summer, we had hundreds of people going on these rides. And we would just take over the streets. And it was really cool because you'd come back from a day of adventure, and you'd have new friends. Maybe there was a new lover or a new business partner. Incredible things were coming from it, that permission to connect. So anyways, the reason why I mentioned that was because here I am in this very dark period. It was too cold to ride bikes, so the bike club wasn't meeting. The Burger Boys had disbanded, as I mentioned. I wasn't working, and I felt very isolated, like I've mentioned. So really what I needed was community. I needed a sort of a dose of my own medicine, and I decided to look at how I could bring people together through a passion point meditation and in a way that could work in the wintertime. So Medi Club was born. The first Medi Club was about 20 people, and the idea was, I was seeing all these colleagues from the music and tech industries learning meditation or interested in it. It was fascinating because I'd been practicing for a few years before, but no one seemed to, it was like a weird thing that I kind of did in private.
Were you public with that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I had to tone it down. I realized that talking about meditation with someone that doesn't care about meditation just makes them care less about meditation. It just pushes them away. So I had to tone it down. Eventually, I learned that. But at this point, I noticed that people were interested. So we did the first Medi Club. UV Alpert, who's sitting in the back there, he gave us his apartment, and we did the first one. Donna, you'd been there once when you spoke at a Medi Club. But we did the first Medi Club. There was 23 people, and we shared a moment of quiet. And then I spoke. I shared with the room some of the stuff I shared here about what I was feeling: fear, uncertainty, some of the social media comparison stuff. And I'd never really spoken vulnerably in front of a group of peers, especially peers that I looked up to from these industries that I was a part of. And it was very nerve-wracking to share in that way, to share about the self, not just the usual external stuff. And after the share happened, someone else spoke up and shared what they were going through and some of the fear that they were experiencing. And then someone else went, someone else. And then we had this really powerful conversation right after a meditation where we were connecting. And it was in that moment where it was clear to me that I'd sort of found a new platform that really made me feel alive.
And you had an awakening around it, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I want to just read this hilarious quote. I just thought it was so funny because it describes, I think we've all been there. When Jesse was talking about that dark place, he went to a gift shop, and there was a card in the gift shop, and the front of the card, when he was having a particularly bad day, the front of the card said, "Be in love with you every minute." Be in love with your life every minute of it. I wanted to burn the card. I thought that was, but I think everyone can relate to that, right? So in that moment, when you were really going down that sort of rabbit hole of darkness, and then you kind of etched yourself out of it by realizing, this is something that I do love. Burger King boys were done with, and the Cyclones had to have a respite due to weather, right? So what is it, when you think, you use the word self-help, which is, I find it very interesting. Do you think there's a difference between self-help and self-improvement? Like, you know, like how there's this self-help books and then there's the self-improvement. Like, do you see sort of a differentiation?
No. But please elaborate.
Well, I think I was just thinking, because I think sometimes there are self-help guides, let's say, that invite us to look at ourselves and to start doing some work. So you actually have to go into the litmus test of your own life. There are others that say, do this, do this, do this. So some of them, I think, are really instructional. And I think where we resonate in this sort of more modern sense of meditation and wisdom is that you want it to be invitational, not instructional. So, you know, what do you...
No, I think it has to come from the self. It has to really come from you. You have that aha with yourself, and not because somebody tells you what to do to feel better or to be better. I think you have that, suddenly you summon it up and say, I would feel it. This is what it is for now, what I should do. This is the answer.
You just know.
Yeah, I think you come to that point, to that
But you
realization.
You listen to get that, don't you?
Yeah, and you listen inside as well. You listen to yourself. Because if you're always told what to do, it is outside there. I think suddenly, it's inside of you. You tell yourself what to do, where
That's
to
right.
go. It's a self-healing. It's a self-school.
It is.
It-
Well, St. Francis of Assisi, I think he has an amazing quote where he talks about, you know, that which we're looking for is what is doing the looking. And suddenly you realize when you shut up, and meditation's a hugely transformational tool for it. You shut up long enough that you tune into the frequency of desire, of love, of self-knowledge, and then something else comes up.
Exactly. I did, for a while, I wanted to only listen, and I'm always spoken to when I go out at night, and I like to go out at night, and I was making myself a little, I had it by a jeweler, made a little silver thing, and I put it on my lapel, and it says, practicing silence. And I would go to a party, and I would be approached, and I would say,
We need to get
and
one of
then I
those.
would only listen, and I would listen for hours and hours, and it was so interesting.
How fascinating.
And I was so happy. I didn't have to chime in. I didn't have to have any blah blah going on. I was just
Wow.
collecting.
I think we
And-
should change the Burger King jackets for
and
that.
when that's also when I started getting this idea about doing these interviews for that book, because I thought, I will ask these people I want to interview, I will ask them only one question. And I asked them the question, what is the marrow in your bone? And that was it. And then that whole story unfolded. And when you said this, suddenly there's a cocoon of intimacy, and I would only listen because I was so practiced in it, and I got all these stories told, and I just loved it. I got totally hooked on it.
I feel like that question is a great permission to create connection.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it sounds like your
is.
book gets to then
Yeah.
expose what
Yeah,
happened
and
to them.
and I'm just saying, it just popped into my mind. I mean, it came to me. It wasn't something I looked for. It just came, like, things happen.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up intimacy. This is Beatrix's book, which is stunning. A philosopher's style. And it is, I'm happy you can see mine is very beloved and dog-eared, but it's an incredible book. It's like there's so many stories and poems and pictures, and it's this labyrinth I was discovering things about myself through your art and through what was written. It's really amazing. I'm sure that was part of it's like a trip. But we talk about intimacy, and something that I think in the many clubs that I've gone to, Jess, I hear a lot of people struggling with two things: stress and anxiety through lack of connection. And I think this is the paradox of our times, where we're so fantastically connected through technology.
And you said that sentence, New York is so lonely.
Yeah.
It's true, I'm much less lonely on the farm. I can be very lonely here.
Yeah.
It's very lonely.
Yeah.
You sit in your little cube if you're not constantly running for something, and it's very alone.
Mm-hmm.
And
isolated. You use that word as well. No, I was just going to go down the same thing. Like, what do you do with that? And I think some people respond in different ways. We are living, as we said, in turbulent times. We have an opiate, epidemic. We've got heroin rife in suburbs, cocaine everywhere, and I work a lot in the meditation work that I do, serving people in that community, and it's filled with tumult. And it's really a little crazy to kind of watch people transcendent of age, kind of in a multi-generational way, going through some really tough stuff. And we were talking about intimacy, and in your book here, intimacy is messy. Intimacy resides in the heart of trust. And I've heard this. That was the second thing that I've heard many times when I've sat with the breakout groups at Medi clubs, is hearing people talk about, wanting to be connected and lacking intimacy, and yet we know that we can get on any app and basically at 5 o'clock be on that app, and by 7 o'clock hooking up with someone. Now that doesn't equate itself to intimacy. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts, both of you, on how do we sort it out, but what do you think? Because is it something that I'm just seeing, or are we all witnessing this?
No, I do think what I wrote, intimacy is messy, because the one who invites it invites that you let go of that thing which you show to the world how perfectly okay you are. And so suddenly there's this allowance of letting go of that, and this opening up and you can go into that messy world of yours, and into those sadness corners, and into those strange joys you have, and then the other has the allowance too, that it permits each other something one doesn't do when it's a fast and not intimate world where we usually live.
Yeah. What do you say about intimacy?
Well, I think, so for me, this really boils down to connection, the human connection.
Yeah.
And there are so many fascinating things that I think are shifting and evolving, and very quickly in regards to how we live our lives and how we know life. Trying to think of like the fastest way that I can explain this. So where I come from on this is I look at the fact that for over 1 million years we lived in tribal societies where we did everything together, and we supported each other, and we hunted together, and we ate together, and we raised kids together. And the concept of being around people that you didn't interact with didn't exist. And then in a very short period of time, essentially since the agricultural revolution 12,000, 15,000 years ago, this idea of ownership and property came into being, and suddenly, really for the first time in humankind's history, you can live in a modern city or a modern suburb and be surrounded by many people, but be deeply alone, dangerously alone. And
we're not built for that, are we?
we're really not. I mean, it's not in our blood. It's not in our DNA. And it's interesting when I look at what's happening with my generation, I see that religion was a really meaningful place to go to have connection and community. And the stat, if, you know, for millennials, 3/4 of us don't affiliate with religion, which is a big disconnect from previous generations in regards to how they engage with religion. So there's this yearning for connection and space for support and community, but there's a void, and of course we're reaching for technology to fill that naturally. I don't think technology is bad, but I think the balance is so lost, is so far off right now. So, you know, I'm sure we've all heard the research. While we are more connected than ever before, we are also lonelier than ever before, and more anxious and more depressed. There are a lot of different things that point to that. I think it's really interesting that, so we're yearning for this, for moments of intimacy, and we're yearning for this connection, yet I see that there's a giant fear of intimacy that a lot of young people I know have, including myself. I was dating somebody recently, and she was very unreliable with our plans, which is something that I don't tolerate very well. But anyways, I brought it up, and she opened up to me very nervously, and she said, look, I just want you to know the reason why I'm like this is because I'm afraid of opening myself and going there with partners because I'm afraid of getting hurt. And it's not the first time this has been expressed to me, and it's also something that I know I deal with as well, and something that my dad communicated
We're all
to me.
mirrors unto each other, so Rumi says.
My dad helped me see this in myself when he told me how he was with my mom before they got married. So it's really interesting to me that while we yearn for intimacy in moments where we've got it right in front of us, we have such fear around it.
It's interesting, though. I think when you think about the construct that we're dealing with, because in the primordial sense, you mentioned DNA. If we look at our history, most of us have been brought up, let's call it, with archetypes, fairy tales, stories of that nature. And in the celestial realms, the celestial gods and goddesses, which a lot of our ideologies come from, at least the Western concepts, some of the Eastern as well, but those concepts would sort of draw from archetypes, right? And yet, we're living at a time where we're iconizing Insta-stars, right? Whether they make something good or bad or whatever, let's put that to the side. But we're iconizing people that have got reality shows and all of, things, and it's making people very wobbly, because when you look at that, and the people that are, whether they have a sex tape or not really, propagating what might be healthiest in the world, we're choosing collectively to kind of iconize that. So what that does, I think, on a primordial level in our dreaming, like I work with Aboriginals in Australia, they would say that affects the dreamland, that affects your dream time, not your dreaming as Freud and all that talk about it, but the dreaming that we have as a collective, and then the dreaming that you have as an individual feeds and speaks into that. So on what I'm saying, on a fundamental note, when we don't have a new idea of what it is going to be, and I think when we start talking now about this, we've all been hearing about exponential growth, the singularity is here. Everybody feels this great sense of urgency and locomotion, but we don't know what the destination is, and yet we're all part of it. So part of, I think, this conversation and all of us, our charge could be that we have to kind of be architects and designers of what we want it to be, not wondering and complaining about what it's not, but rather designing toward what we would want it to be. And that's going to take great bravery on many, many levels. And something that, I wanted to kind of touch on, because Jesse, you talked about one response I think that you had with that in mind is you said community builder. You looked at what you were really good at, and community building. I want to ask you about that, because I know this is a time where there's a lot of people wanting to get involved with civil action, not so much civil disobedience, but I think that's part of it. But tell me about community building and how, like, one of your first responses was like, I'm going to do this because I know how.
Well, for me, it boils down to this notion of permission for connection. Mm-hmm. And the first the first time really that I felt the power of that was, and I guess you could say it was my first community purpose-driven experience, was when I was in 8th grade. I went to a private high school in Los Angeles where you go on retreat at the end of the year. And they put all the boys in one cabin and all the girls in another cabin. And I was upset that they separated us. So at 2 a.m. I led a mission. I kind of rallied all my boy students and, sat down each one of them. I actually recorded it with a tape recorder, interviewing them, saying, "Can you believe the teachers are separating us?" And led this mission at 2 a.m. to the girls' cabin. And it was a success. Yeah. And they freaked out, and there was screaming, and the teachers were very upset. I actually got 2 years of behavior probation for that.
Oh, Lord.
And that actually really changed me. I was unable to express a lot as a result of that. That's another story.
Oh, lie down.
But that moment on retreat created a bunch of new friendships because we had this sense of camaraderie. And I looked to that.
Galvanized something else, didn't it? Right.
So I look to that, and when it comes to community building, it's like, what's the shared act? What's the thing that creates the permission that we can all contribute to? If that's a mass bike ride or a mass meditation, how are we contributing to an experience that allows us to connect with each other? And that element of contribution is critical with community building. This is what separates, in my opinion, community from a community gathering from an event. Community gathering, to me, each person there is a vital organ in this larger growing organism, and is required to give something for there to be a sense of community, which in turn gives people a sense of purpose. When we go back and we look at how we existed in tribal societies, everyone played a role in supporting each other. We needed each other.
They felt connected.
We were needed. We needed to help each other. Today, it's very easy to go unneeded in many ways because of the beauty of technology. So a real community creates space where we feel needed. I've been to some open AA meetings, and I've been so moved, one, by the healing that's occurring, two, by this concept of contribution really coming to life. If anyone's been to one before, everyone has a role. There are people that are greeting, there are people that are cleaning up chairs, there are people that are reading this thing and reading that thing, and this element of contribution creates this real sense of purpose and connection and support. So anyways, that's just one thing that I start with when I look at community building. What's the permission for connection, and how are people contributing?
I wanted to ask you about your inspiration, Beatrix, in your artwork, which is incredible. I see so much in your art. What's been inspiring to you? Like, who inspires you? What inspires you besides nature?
Yeah, people. That connection inspires me. I am I'm listening to him, fascinated, because I am very intimate, and I am inviting intimacy, but I am not inviting that huge, large mass of intimacy. I am very good with on one or two or three, but I am very, So I think I'm always inspired by that person in front of me. It had always to do with people. And I was just thinking in my mind, because you say I have so much to do with nature or come from nature. I did many sculptures, very, very tall, 8, 9, 10 feet tall, from straw. I made sculptures from straw, and had also exhibitions with them. But it was, I don't know, way too early, because I just wasn't successful with it. But I was so fascinated by the material of straw and where it comes from, and making a human form from it.
That's amazing.
But
the impermanence of straw.
And they're still around. They're 25 years old, and I still have most of them. And some I left in nature, and birds were making nests up on their hats, and one of them became a bronze. It was I made it had it made into a bronze. So it's, I don't know. Inspiration is very intimate to me. And I'm also very inspired by literature, reading, and then I'm inspired. But I haven't been making art in a while, and I'm more writing now.
Well, that's your art.
Which just came from finding my father's love letters to my mother. And when I found them, I discovered a man I've never known, of course. I didn't know this soft, tender person. And I wanted to write it down, and I've started writing about what I remembered from my childhood, from my children here, from my sons. And then it became a book. That it made me a writer. I've never I just sat down and did it. Yeah.
Your art's been really cathartic in so many ways.
Yeah.
Has it healed you?
Now, while we talk, it's interesting because we talk about intimacy, and I was twice married to non-intimate men, and they're really, and I always thought I can heal them, or can do something to help them, and my first one drowned in alcohol. He became a total alcoholic, and was a brilliant man. And now I'm divorcing the other one who is also not able to. And I didn't get it. I was the giving intimacy always. And now I'm
Now you're ready to
out
receive
of
it.
it. Yeah, I'm so exhausted from it.
not meant to be exhausting.
I would like to have someone who is partner with me in intimacy.
Yeah.
Because it isn't about being together, which we were, of course, but there's something was always missing, and I knew it, but he couldn't get it. I mean, everybody was reacting, I think.
Yeah.
And
it's-
that's why we need schools for men or bicycle rides where they all get together. Yeah, it's true. And where they go to burger and eat burgers and open up their, oh my God,
hot
I
chakras.
don't know what to do. My wife says this to me and I don't understand. And the next one says, yes, I just know what you're talking about. I mean, they need that so desperately.
And they need permission to
And
share that as
permission,
well.
and yeah.
I think men are feeling that. I'm hoping men are feeling that, and that women are feeling that. I think everyone seeks liberation, you know, in a multi-generational, universal way, and that's the kind of the power of the gathering, right? And I think I was going to ask you about that. What's your kind of attitude towards your own work? Like, does it make you feel vulnerable, making your art, showing it, like getting it out there?
No, I always love doing it and showing it. I mean, I haven't had no problems with that ever. Of course, it's hard when somebody doesn't get it, but I kind of, and it was wonderful to show art. I love it.
So you're brave about it, not reluctant.
Yeah, and I'm not even so convinced that it's so great what I'm doing. I'm just doing it.
You're doing
it's
it. I
not
love it.
the best. I think I'm a better writer than a painter or a sculptress. I have a few sculptures in the garden. They are bronzes. I think, oh my God! Whenever I see them, I say, it's not really very good. I don't think so. But it's in bronze, so what can you do? You know,
Melt it.
it's horrifying.
Melt that
You're
sucker
right.
down.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But not now, not now. I'm just
Create,
I do something else.
Okay, so I love this.
Now
Are
I
you guys
become
having
a
good time?
farmer, you know.
All
now
right.
I'm getting into agriculture, so I'm leaving that all behind. Yeah.
You sure are.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave enough time for questions at the end because I'm sure folks want to have a few things. Jessie, I picked something out for you. I won't tell you who wrote it until later, but it kind of just struck me as something I really wanted to share with you. I was operating mainly on impulse, like a salmon swimming blindly upstream toward the site of his own conception. I would dress up these impulses in slogans and theories that I discovered in books, thinking falsely that the slogans meant something, that they somehow made what I felt more amenable to proof. But at night, lying in bed, I would let the slogans drift away to be replaced with a series of images, romantic images of a past I'd never known. Communities had to be created, fought for, tended to like gardens. They expanded or contracted with the dreams of men. Through organizing, through shared sacrifice, membership had been earned. And because membership was earned, I believed that it might, over time, admit the uniqueness in my life. That was my idea of organizing. It was a promise of redemption. Barack Obama, right? And I was so struck by that. I was like, oh, that's so, Jesse's going to, like, does that resonate with you? Absolutely. In what way?
There are many elements of it. I mean, I think as a starting point, this concept of the slogans, is that the word that was being used?
Yeah, his slogans.
Yeah, and letting them go to connect with something that's more true to the heart reminds me of a theme that comes up a lot at our work with MediClub, where there's this concept of how things should be and the way that most people are, and we feel we must be the same way. And that it takes real courage, like you've identified, to be able to step past that, or to say thank you for that bit of information. I'll consider it, but I don't have to do it that way. Yeah. And that if we're able to, if I'm able to let go of what I feel like society wants me to do, and honor my heart, there's real power and magic in that space. So.
Beautiful. We need to kind of come to the point of questions in a second, but I had just one more thing that I wanted to just share with you guys. It was Kurt Vonnegut, and he goes, what should young people do with their lives today? Many things, obviously, but the most daring thing is to create stable communities in which the terrible disease of loneliness can be cured, right? So I think this is kind of where we are meeting and why we're gathering. And I'd really wanted to invite all of us to gather more and more in the name of love, in the name of community, in the name of connection. And I'd certainly invite you guys, if you don't know the person next to you, before the night's through, in front or beside, make sure that you give a handshake, a hug, and hello. I've got one last thing to say, but I wanted to just say, does anybody have any questions? Is there anything last that you guys wanted to share? Anything you want to share? Because you're welcome to. If not, does anybody have any questions that they wanted to? Tom, you wanted to invite? Do you want to just come and get? Yeah. Do you want to ask a question? Can you guys hear him in the back? Would you like a mic?
Yeah, Jesse, you mentioned the billion-dollar tech startup. A lot of pressure at NYU around all these other kids. You're seeing people go on to make a lot of money and being, that guy. And you had to get to a place where you redefine success. And maybe you're still in that process, being around the tech world and everything. But also this idea about the tyranny of judgment. Your own judgment and the judgment of others of you is something that you have to probably deal with in this journey that you're on. Can you talk a little bit about that, getting over this definition of the successful billionaire on Sandpoint Road or whatever it is, and then getting beyond judgment?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so this notion of success and comparing myself to my peers was a really sort of torturous piece to the journey that I'm on right now, especially the first year. Like I shared, I decided that I would give myself to these gifts, even though it wasn't clear how it would turn into $1 billion business. And what I found was when I started to give those gifts, and I mentioned how MediClub was born, and MediClub began to grow, and more people got involved, and I was watching how it was having a real impact on people's lives to the point where we had thousands of people coming together, some of our gatherings. And the feedback that I got was so meaningful. Yet, and by the way, doing that nothing felt better than being able to create that for other people. I felt so in line with purpose in those moments. Yet, I was tortured by the fact that I didn't know how I was going to make millions of dollars off of it, and I couldn't take it seriously for the first year. I just referred to it as a hobby, and I was kind of convinced that there'd be this other thing that was going to happen. And eventually, I had to move out of my big beautiful loft and get roommates again, which was, by the way, very very sort of privileged conversation. I'll acknowledge that, but given the context of my life, this was tough for me, and it wasn't really the shift in regards to what we're talking about didn't happen until I moved out of the loft. I got the roommates. Much smaller apartment, still great place, much smaller apartment, and realized that I was still really probably happier than ever. Where I was living and the way that I was living actually didn't really play a role as much as I thought it would, because I was giving to myself at that point. I was giving myself to this work that was so fulfilling, and I eventually was able to give myself permission to say, follow the gift, follow the purpose, do what you're here to do. Money will follow, success will follow, whatever success even means. And once I was able to do that, the thing just took off. I mean, it really started to grow fast.
You let go, huh?
Yeah. And I started to just love the work finally. It was so beautiful. And in a very short period of time, we started making a business model formed in a way that we had just never identified, and then we became profitable in a short period of time. It's still nowhere close to a $1 billion business, but when I go back to that place, because it'll still come up, I remind myself, and this is something that I think's happened is really through my meditation practice and through really sitting in the discomfort that we've spoken about, that I'm starting for the first time in my life to feel established in being me. And what I do, it doesn't matter so much as long as I'm clear about who I am. And it allows me to just sort of let go of trying to control all the elements of success and know the business model and the growth plan. All these things and stuff's important, but I've been able to let go of it and just know that by being me, this is the greatest gift I can give myself in the world. And when I'm able to be in that space, it's unlike anything I've experienced before. But then I'll get invited to my buddy's bachelor party, and the price for the weekend, is hefty. And again, I kind of get reminded of it again a little bit. And this is still sort of the process that I'm going through. At the end of the day, I'll say this, then I'll end. How we determine success is different for everybody. One thing that I can say is, while I don't really have much of a savings account, and I'm 32, and I'd like to have a savings account and build, have some money to build a family. What I can say is that I feel like I'm here being and doing what I meant to do, and that right now feels more important than anything else, because I'm seeing how it's impacting the world.
Yeah, and there's great power in being that vulnerable and being able to welcome that sort of transformation in self, right?
Sure.
Because you're just in it. As Robert Frost says, sometimes, the only way through it is through it.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to navigate those waters. What were you going to say?
Would you like me to speak to the judgment, or would you like to?
Yeah, I would actually. I was going
Okay.
to bring it up. Yeah.
Tom's question about judgment is, I'm really glad you asked it, because that's been the toughest piece, aside from career and money. That's been the toughest piece for me. And I've spoken about this a few times before at MediClub. Leading up to the work that I'm doing now, I was really good at making sure that everybody liked me, and sort of manicuring my output and my relationships. And anytime someone had an issue with me, I would put it out so I was cool with everybody. And that was like from the way that I dressed to the way that I spoke to the opinions that I expressed in conversations. It was enough of me to be me, but it was never like pushy enough to ruffle any feathers. And that way of living was very exhausting. And it wasn't until about a year into MediClub.
Exhausting is the word. Like, wow.
It wasn't until about a year into the work that I'm doing now where I realized that it really sits on my biggest fears and my biggest trigger points. My biggest fear, I would say, is being unliked or unloved by other people. And getting in front of groups where there are lots of people and it's in the realm of spirituality and meditation and talking about feelings, and I'm a white man speaking in front of predominantly female-based groups. You know, there's all sorts of stuff that comes up. Yeah. And especially when that's a group of, you know, like you were at the Summer Stage Central Park. That was 2,000 people there, and I was speaking. And that was a very tough experience for me, that one. I was in the video, and I was in a really tough place at that one. That was actually kind of a breaking point for me.
I remember.
And it took me some time and some tough experiences to realize that I cannot control what everybody thinks of me. People will judge me. And it was this very liberating moment after that Summer Stage Big Quiet, where I finally gave myself permission to let go, and sort of my guidelines were, look, as long as I'm acting authentically and I'm creating from a place of thinking about what the community needs, and I do that in a way that feels true to me, that's all I can do. And it felt really good to be able to stand for something. And what that means is some people don't like me or don't like what we're doing.
They don't need to.
And a lot of people, I think, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people really appreciate it. So that, being able to let go of judgment in that way was a really huge learning. It sucks that it took 30 years of my life to get there.
That's a man thing, more so than it's
I don't know.
Beginning. You are just in the beginning of
Yeah,
your
I mean,
life,
I've
think.
not fully let go of this, by the way. I mean, there's still something
a
working.
work in progress. We sat with Quincy Jones one night, and he came up with Ray Charles, and it's a beautiful thing. We'd love you guys to go with, and this is a great sort of keep it in your heart, where he said, Ray Charles said to him one day, like they were going into some club, and they're walking in the front. They were about to play there, and the guys at the door were like, "Where do you think you're going? You're going to enter in the back. You don't walk into the front here." And Q was about to lose it, and Ray's like, turned to him and he said, not 1 ounce of what they think of me is going to affect what I think of me. Right. And I thought it was such a powerful thing, and it kind of is a great mantra to keep in mind, to have your own sail set in your own direction, because I think especially in the space of modern consciousness and these movements, not everybody's ready, not everybody's as hungry, not everybody wants to eat or drink from the same table. And I think there's a complexity of faith, and there's a complexity of wisdom, and it is what it is. So we have to kind of create and respond according to that, and let our art and our poetry, our music and our dance also be those things that hold us up, that buoy up, who we are today.
When there we go to that, you need to learn. I mean, it's one of the biggest and hardest things to know yourself and then live that authentic you, and not constantly look around everywhere where those influences come from, and where what was told to you as a child. You really have to begin when you really go to a conscious place at one point in your being, in your growing up, and rediscover yourself.
Yeah.
And that is your journey, and then be true. This is me. This is really me. And it's a learning process.
And actually loving that part. We often talk about that in the journey of consciousness, where you go from that place of self-inquiry, which is kind of what you're describing, and the next transcendent journey of that is to go to that place of self-knowledge. And then the next place is where you go to self-esteem and self-love.
Yeah.
And it's a journey. It's called a practice for a reason, because you go down that if you've got that sort of willingness, to want to go down there. Sorry, we interrupted. You got your questions. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to ask a question in the back? Yes, Vero.
Oh, me? Oh, I lived in Munich, and then I convinced my family to go and live in New York because I felt that was an adventure worthwhile. And then when we moved to New York, I'm a homeopathic person. I knew that I had to go out into the countryside on the weekends. The Central Park became very small. And then we had a house on the Hudson, which burned down after a year of having it. It was totally horrifying. And then for exactly 9 months, I would only eat rice and meditate or sit still. I didn't even know then what meditation was. I was just only eating rice and thinking why this had happened to me. Why did it happen? Because everything in there burned down, and paintings and heirlooms and family and letters and a lot. And so then I took that pendulum with which I had always pendled the homeopathic medicine while curing my poor children. I took it and put out the map of America, of the east coast of America, and asked, where should I plant a tree? Where should I go to be with nature? And the pendulum took me to Virginia and to Charlottesville and to the farm. And that's why I'm there. I traveled by train.
Amazing.
I sit 6 hours in the train. It's so far away. I always wish it would be closer to something, but yet it isn't. And it is meant to be, and it's really fabulous to live so alone somewhere.
That's
and it's the
amazing.
pendulum, and I'm asking my pendulum later, after this, I ask it which wine to drink.
Which person to
Completely
kiss?
devoted to my pendulum.
Were you already a Buddhist when you made that decision? I'm curious. Were you already like practicing life as a Buddhist when you made that decision?
No, Buddhism came. Somebody saw my youngest son, and said he is a reincarnate from Tibet, and through him, which was then really true, through him, I came to the Tibet house and to the Dalai Lama and to going to Tibet, and suddenly it was opening a whole new world for me. This is what I needed, and this is 15 years ago. Yeah.
Anybody else? Good. One last question. What about you, Chris Shambra? I'm sure you have a question.
I mean, the most impressive thing for me was living in the now. Living now. There is absolutely nothing more powerful than this thing. Here we are. You and I. Here am I. You. This is it. There's nothing else. You don't know what's out the door. And I found this the most powerful thing. And that I find it an adventure. This is why I loved to do this listening thing. This is now. This is it. No, nothing else. And I'm really not interested in everything out there. And I don't even have a computer. I just have my telephone, which I adore. But I think the now was it for me?
For me, I would absolutely more in regards to not introspection. What'd you say? Outrospection.
He's making the word up.
So think of it this way: the Cartesian age of I think, therefore I am. You guys advocate for a new age of you are, therefore I am. Think about that.
Go ahead.
Therefore I am.
Ubuntu, like in Africa, there's an expression, Ubuntu. I am because you am, I am because you are. That's okay. Good.
For me, introspection is it. I think there's great value in being introspective and considering and looking inward. I know that being the anxious Jew that I am, growing up in Los Angeles, that the amount of introspection that I've done in my life is definitely like gonna knock a couple years off me. But the moments where I feel most grounded, where I feel most alive, and connected to a sense of purpose, are when I am expressing. Expressing my true nature, or as you would say, essential nature. When I'm in line with that expression of my true self is when I feel most alive, when I feel most sort of in touch with why I'm here. And I often have to do work on letting go of the introspection so I can put myself back into a place of expression.
I think that we can oscillate, and that's where the crucible comes in, because sometimes you look at FOMO and look at social media, everything about it has led us to believe the lie of voyeurism, that we need to look and look and look. And there's a saying that says that the one that looks out dreams, the one that looks in awakens. And, you know, for me, the most powerful thing is only going to be the glance inside. And you hope the glance stays to be longer than a glimpse and that it becomes big and fat and deep and wide. And I was sharing with Beatrix that one of our great teachers who comes from South India, where I'm from, Ramana Maharshi, talks about forego all your searching in the temples, in the mosques, in the churches, the synagogues. There's only one thing to ask, and that is, who am I? And when you keep asking yourself that question, actually is a very powerful meditation. Who am I? And you keep asking to the point where the who that's asking disappears into the who that's listening, and the reception. Everything disappears, where you become nothing. And in that nothingness, you're connected to everything. So for me, I would definitely say that it's that place of in as opposed to out. I'm mindful of the time and everybody's time for getting to dinners and all of that. So if you don't mind, I'm going to, unless someone has something really pressing, I want to make sure that we know that there's some amazingly powerful, beautiful, divine people in the room, every one of you. There are communities here to belong to connect with. I want to make sure that you become part of the Medi Club family. Go to the big quiets, be part of the community. Bring your love, bring your knowledge, be connected. Jesse's easily found and on Facebook and all that community does really powerful healing work, and that's amazing. Beatrix has 2 new books that are out. One's an autobiography. If anyone wants to have a look at it here, they're all available now, but her story is just transformative and elevating, and that's super important. That's there, and then the philosopher's style as well. And for my part, be a part of, if we don't know who you are, come and give us a hug. I've got cards. Everybody probably got a little card on the seat. We do an experience, whether you come to Medi, whether you come to me, whether you're part of our community, we're the same, all of us. So ours is called Dip into Bliss, and you experienced a few minutes of it right at the beginning, but it's the same thing. It comes from the Vedanta, taking you right back to that same place of everythingness, that simple, joyful place. So come and be part of our community. And just in closing, George Carlin, I just couldn't resist bringing our beloved, as we've had so many of the great ones, but George Carlin had such an interesting take on things. I just thought it was so cool. He said, I want to live my life backwards. You start out dead and you get out of the way. Then you wake up in a nursing home feeling better every day. Then you get kicked out for being too healthy. You enjoy your retirement and collect your pension. Then, when you start work, you get a gold watch on your first day. You work 40 years until you're too young to work. You get ready for high school, drink alcohol, party, and you're generally promiscuous. Then you go to primary school and you become a kid. You play and you have no responsibilities. Then you become a baby again, and then you spend your last 9 months floating peacefully in luxury in spa-like conditions, central heating, room service, Root on tap, and then you finish off as an orgasm. I rest my case. So thank you all for being here, and please join and be part of Turning Points. We love you guys. Mwah!
Thank you, Donna.